Welcome to the Decatur Dish with Atlanta News First and our media partners at Decaturish. I'm Maria Moreau, joined by the one and only Dan Wisenhunt for another installment of DeKalb County's top headlines and some extended conversation around the election. Dan, how are you today?
Doing great. Great to be here.
We have a lot of news coming out of DeKalb County recently, and I want to jump right in and talk about the issue that's going to impact really a large amount, if not all, residents in the county, and that is a proposed water and sewer increase, a price hike, as they've been calling it.
Right. They're talking about increasing water and sewer rates 6% a year through 2027. They're going to raise about $100 million toward a $200 million bond to upgrade the Scottdale water treatment plant. It's the only treatment plant we have in DeKalb County. That is a small chunk of the estimated $4 billion worth of improvements that need to be made to our water and sewer line. There is a meeting this evening on Sam Street about it. We're going to have a reporter there, and we'll keep you posted about what they have to say.
And I do just want to throw out the time for that. It starts at 6:30. As Dan mentioned, the address, if you wanted to attend in person, 178 Sam Street in Decatur. However, there is a Zoom option as well, and I know Decaturish put out some of that information. So if you wanted to participate, if this is something that is going to impact you, please know that that resource is available, and you can essentially come to this virtually or in person and make your voice heard.
Also, it's probably not the last meeting there's going to be on it, so
exactly.
There's that.
Dan, this is a story that Decaturish first brought, really that took the Scottdale community back a bit, because it came up that a massive transmission line project was underway, and the residents in the area where this line is being proposed are going to be impacted the most.
Yeah, I wake up every morning and I see the beautiful skyline in my house, and I think to myself, I really wish I saw an 80-foot transmission line on the horizon, and the good people at Georgia Power hear me, and they're going to help by putting them somewhere in my neighborhood. This is a replacement project for power lines that already exist. The main contention is they're talking about running some of these 80-foot transmission lines, and you know what I'm talking about. It's not like the regular old wooden pole. These are big, tall metal structures that you can see from everywhere. They're talking about putting this down Sycamore Street, which is part of a historic neighborhood, and the city didn't know about it. I've got an email from a city official saying that they were blindsided. Apparently there was a meeting previously scheduled at the American Legion Post. That's going to happen today. We're going to be there. It's at 6 o'clock in Avondale Estates. You probably want to get there early, because I think every public official in Decatur that can be there will be there. The latest I heard is that the Georgia Power is going to try to work with the city to come up with some alternative solutions. But what we're finding out about this process, which people in the know already knew, is that Georgia Power can do pretty much whatever it wants. It's not beholden to tree ordinances. It's not beholden to planning or zoning. Utility companies have a pretty free hand to do whatever they want to do. So the community is trying to wrangle this process as best they can to get an outcome that they can live with. Georgia Power saying they need it for reliable energy access and for future growth. We've got Lula Hills coming online and a bunch of other stuff. So that's the main reason they're doing it. But there is a meeting tonight. One of the things I love about being a journalist is it's like being an Alcoholics Anonymous. There's always a meeting you can go to.
I knew you were going to set that up.
That's right.
Go down this
I
road.
might have made that joke 20 times or so, but
I did just want to bring people back to the map. Again, this is really the area where this project is being discussed. So Decaturish put out a lot of information and detail surrounding this, and I know you guys are tracking closely the next steps, including what's going to come out of this meeting tonight.
We'll be there. Can't wait.
All right. I wouldn't be the Decatur Dish if we didn't talk about the election, the big story, and DeKalb County as well in the headlines for Georgia's election. There were some issues with voting precincts, specifically in the county on election day 1 week ago, where some people had to either be turned away temporarily or that voting had to be just paused because there were reports of bomb threats that turned out not to be credible.
Yes, so we got this email from a Russian email address. Said there's going to be bomb threats at bombs in precincts that were about to go off. First thing we did, of course, is forwarded it to the FBI and the GBI and the police and all of those people. They probably already had it, but we made sure they did have it. And then I ran down to the Tucker precinct. The thing about the bomb, and these happened all over the country, in DeKalb County, most of our voters had already early voted. So by the time these things came in, it wasn't a very packed house down at any of these precincts. So the effect that they had was minimal, probably, at least in DeKalb County. But it did happen. It was not on our bingo card. We sat and we came up with a game plan to cover these elections, and bomb threats is, I guess, something, sadly, we're going to have to add to our bingo card for future elections. What will they come up with next? That's really all I know about it. Now, obviously, there was no credence to any of that. Just wasn't great. Wasn't my favorite way to spend election night. I normally like to panic watch CNN. I don't normally like to run down to precincts and ask, hey, did the bomb go off?
And thankfully, again, they didn't turn out to be credible. Those voters did get in the county an allotted time from the time that it was paused past 7 p.m. to cast their ballot. So for counties that had a 23-minute delay, they were able to vote until 7:23. The Secretary of State saying that they were able to remedy the situation, but the investigation did have to take place just to rule out any threat to public safety.
Yeah, it did, and we got through it. It was really scary, but there were some other interesting results from Tuesday as well. And local journalist George Cheedy is going to join us today and give us his thoughts about what happened here locally in DeKalb County.
Let's take a listen.
And joining me to talk about the local election results is my dear friend and the sage of Pine Lake, George Cheedy. George, how are you today?
I'm good, all things considered.
All things considered, George is a local journalist, writes for The Guardian. You might have seen his work. George, let's talk really, really local. Let's talk about first the District 3 County Commission runoff. Our candidates are Andrew Bell and Nicole Messiah. Larry Johnson had previously held that seat, and then he stepped down to run for CEO. Obviously, he did not win. What's your read on the fact that we have a runoff? I know we had 4 candidates, so it's not that surprising.
I mean, there's almost always a runoff when you've got a county commission race in DeKalb County because 8,000 people run for the seats, which is fine. It's democracy, at least for the moment. Andrew Bell, I think, has a lot. He has a very strong community presence. I've known him for years. I know him a little better than Nicole, and I think that's part of the reason why he made the runoff.
Andrew's run for other things before as well.
That's helpful.
Yeah, he's got some of that. People seen him on a ballot before. And then we have the District 7 race, which was Lorraine Cochran Johnson's old seat. She also stepped down to run for CEO. She ultimately prevailed. I just want to point out that the runoff for these races is going to be December 3rd, in case anybody needed that date. What's your take? The candidates we got for that were Jacqueline Adams and Ladina Bolton.
And again, it's Jacqueline Adams is a perennial candidate, or had been. She won more than 40% of the vote this time. Part of that was ballot position. Like, they go in alphabetical order. People vote for whoever's at the top. But also a lot of name recognition from the previous runs. Her husband is Gregory Adams, who held this seat before being displaced by our now CEO.
I did not know that. Very interesting information. What do you think voters are going to be looking for? Obviously, turnout is going to be critical.
Going to be depressing to anybody who cares about civics in this country.
Sure.
Like, I mean, it will be probably under 10%, unless the 2 candidates get on their horses and drive turnout because they want to win.
They have horses?
One would hope.
Okay.
Like, the Ladina Bolton in particular, she is a former head of the Young Democrats of DeKalb County. She's been part of the party infrastructure for a long time, and so has a lot of friends who know how to get people to go vote in a runoff. It is going to be a competitive runoff.
Indeed it is, and we will have all of the information about the local elections for you on DecaturishVotes.com, so check it out. There are a couple of other results. We had Dorville, Andy Yeomans in a runoff. We had the Chamblee bond referendum pass. We've got a lot of local election results to parse through. Go check those out in DecaturishVotes.com. So on the way over here, George and I were having a conversation in the car, and we were talking about how the trends in DeKalb County as far as voting sort of mirrored the national trends, where the down ballot Democrats seemed to do fine. The Republicans ran candidates in the local races, mostly in the state legislature type races. They were perhaps more competitive than they have been in the past. All the Democrats won. So what does George, does that track with what you're seeing out there as well?
It does. Let me say first, I've been working for The Guardian for about a year, and I'm a national correspondent who covers the South. North Carolina turned around its local stuff so that they no longer have a supermajority at the state legislative races, and Democrats won every state level seat except the presidential one. All we saw across the country was a 2 to 4 point shift in favor of Republicans. In DeKalb County, which is 75, 80% Democratic, that's not enough to displace anybody out of a public office. And yes, in DeKalb County, it was very slightly more Republican than it had been in previous cycles. Same for Fulton County. The only part of the state that really started to be more Democratic was just south of Atlanta. But I think people are overreading what a landslide for electoral purposes is to a landslide in public opinion. We're still a deeply divided country and a deeply divided state, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, at least not without effort.
So the Republicans ran candidates for the state legislative races. They did not run really any for these county races. What's the strategy? What's the thought process there?
They don't think they can win. I mean, I wish it was more complicated than that. And honestly,
but they didn't seem to have a chance in the legislative races either.
So Democrats in Georgia ran 50 candidates in races that they were almost certainly going to lose, and they did. They lost all of them. The goal there was to have somebody local on the ground in places like Ringgold, Georgia, where maybe they'll pick up a point or two. And maybe they did, and then lost 4 and 6 points on the back end because of the wave election. There's a strategy to running local candidates, if only to remind people that they exist. But DeKalb is very, very solidly Democratic, and that's not changing anytime soon.
One of the Democrats that easily run re-election was the state party chair, Nikema Williams, and as everyone who follows politics will know, following the November 5th election, there have been calls by the candidates that ran. They all signed a letter saying basically Nikema Williams needs to step down as party chair. What's going on here? Where is that coming from?
Some of that is just the natural finger pointing that happens after a lost election. I hasten to remind people that Donald Trump won every swing state. And so it's difficult to say, well, Nikema Williams didn't do X and that's why we lost Georgia. On the other hand, she's at the top. Like one expects, somebody in charge to take responsibility. What I'm looking for is a really robust conversation. Exactly the same conversation I should hasten to say I would have expected Republicans to be having if they had lost about what the future looks like, what happened and what happens moving forward. I have sent Congresswoman Williams an email and a Facebook message, and I am eager to speak with her. I think there are a lot of people who want to hear what she has to say about this election. But there is some anxiety, particularly around John Ossoff and his supporters, around what might happen in 2 years, because they don't have a feel for what happened last week.
Why don't they? Why is this so mystifying?
So I think people missed a lot of signals. I don't think there are a whole lot of people, left or right, that saw the gigantic shift among Latino voters that happened this time, a 15-point change in voting habits. I don't think anybody in a position to do anything about it saw the shift in young voters, young men in particular, into the Trump column the way they did. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on about what happened. And they're expecting the person in charge to be leading that conversation.
Let's talk about the future, because we have 2 more months and then we're going to have Donald Trump presidency 2.0. That affects a heavily Democratic county in a way that is different fundamentally than rural Georgia. There's the last Trump presidency, we covered it. It seemed like every week it was some new outrage. Every week there was some new thing that people were upset about. They were asking city leadership to do something. Resolutions were passed. There were protests. There were all kinds of things that happened. So given the history of having lived through this once, what should we be on the lookout for here in DeKalb County? Do you think it's going to play out the same way that it did 4 years ago or 8 years ago?
There are certain things that I am specifically concerned about and will be watching. DeKalb County has a very large immigrant population. Some of that is non-documented. Some of it are refugees, particularly around Clarkston. And I fear that partisans who have a xenophobic bent will target those people. It's incumbent on this community to protect the people who are here legally and to avoid conditions of oppression regardless. That's one. That's one thing I'm looking at. The state legislature is going to get involved with the Trump administration, since the legislature is controlled by Republicans. And we should be watching for changes to the way elections work. All of the other things that we're going to be looking at over the course of the next 4 years around foreign policy, around domestic policy, around all of the things that Donald Trump campaigned on, progressives may fight. Conservatives may fight. But at the end of the day, in 2 years and 4 years, there will be another set of elections. And we need to be sure that those elections are fair. That's what we need to be watching for locally, to ensure that we have the government that we've asked for.
And the best way to keep elections free and fair is to show up in all of them. So if you are a voter in District 3 or District 7, we hope that you will show up for the December 3rd runoff. George, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll join us again.
Anytime.
This is the Decatur Dish Show. We tape on Atlanta News First Plus every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. You could check us out on the Atlanta News First Plus app, which you can download on your phone or your smart TV, and check out all the latest news from Decaturish on Decaturish.com. With that, we'll see everybody next Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. Have a great week.